Amazing stuff. So we've now heard all three of the features that we had at Off the Chest Goes West. We had the incredible Laura Ray, Jaeger, followed by Rakaya Fatuga. Okay, so then after that, we had a little break, and then we had to a bit which we kind of call Word Spoken Live. What this essentially entailed was me sitting down with the three features from the night and having a little conversation with them, asking them a couple of questions about their writing process, and all things spoken word, and then we opened it up to the floor, so some of the people in the audience also got to ask a question. So yeah, enjoy this little bit. It's kind of Word Spoken Live. It's me in my rawest form. I hope you enjoy it. It was definitely something that was kind of new, but definitely something I want to do more of in the future. But for now, have a listen to this one, Word Spoken Live from Off the Chest Goes West. Thank you very much, guys. First of all, can I say thank you very much for coming out. This Off the Chest has been amazing, and I've really enjoyed being in this new space. So yeah, thank you to these guys, Ella and Ifti, for putting this on. Thank you very much. I will keep this very brief. I know, obviously, everyone's wanting to get home because we're in the middle of nowhere. But no, just joking. So guys, look, all three of you, thank you so much for performing those pieces. They were all really, really wonderful pieces, and I think you all brought something different to the night. So yeah, can we have a round of applause for our features, please? So I'm kind of going to go in order. So Laura, I was wanting to kind of first of all ask a little bit about your writing process. So the two poems that you did for us were very much kind of storytelling in form. So I guess I wanted to kind of ask you, when it comes to your writing process, how do you approach it? Do you start with an idea and then run with it, or how do you do it?
So when I started writing, I tried to write prose, like I was always writing prose, but books are really long, and I'm quite a lazy person, so I never finished anything to a point where I was happy to show it to anyone. Like editing, I don't know if any of you tried to write long form prose, but editing it's just awful. And if you're writing for fun and enjoyment, obviously that's not what you want. And I sort of fell into poetry by accident. I was working for a writing charity, because as Ella said, I work in education. So I was working for a writing charity called the Ministry of Stories, who are in East London. There's been no love for West London at all. I'm delighted you're here because I work in this building, and I hope you all come back. Because I teach, and so I'm always working, so it's hard to get to East London. But there were a lot of the volunteers there were involved in spoken word and involved in poetry, and were like, you should come along. And so I basically adapted story ideas I had into poems, because it's such a free art form, I think, because you can write anything and say it's a poem, and no one can dispute that. It doesn't have any laws, and you can... Yeah, it's really liberating, and you can finish poems because, once you're hitting, I think the one I did earlier is 7 minutes. That's kind of you can't really do a poem longer than 7 minutes. That's long for a poem. So yeah, and I also think I find it really hard to talk about myself explicitly, so I sort of hide it in characters and in situations like that, because then I feel like I can almost do something more honest than standing there and talking about my own experiences, because that's something I find really... I've started doing it a little bit more now, but it's something I find really tricky.
Yeah.
So if you've got a character, then you can... It's useful because you have that distance, and you can... Firstly, you don't have to tell the truth, but also you can put parts of yourself in there without having to say that it's you. Mm. Yeah.
So, Jaeger, if I pass the question over to you. So, I've really enjoyed your piece about Canning Town with XR. So, do you want to... so, I assume you obviously wrote that after that event. Is that something that you tend to do with your writing process? You kind of... Something happens and then you start writing. And then my second kind of question to that is, with XR... There's obviously quite a lot of people, and I assume you were of the similar mindset, that there's been a bit of a mix-up with class in the debate about climate change. So maybe if you go into that afterwards, after your writing process.
Cool. Yeah. So the poem wasn't written immediately after the thing that happened in Canning Town. It was written a bit before that, kind of when the wave of protests were happening last summer or just before, is when I had the idea for the poem. So the thought process behind that was understanding that the world is burning, but also noticing that a lot of the conversations about that are amongst white middle-class people and are in a language which is to an extent unfamiliar to myself, but definitely unfamiliar to my family. So when we're like together and I say who cares about climate change, none of them care, because the language that's been discussed in has always been one that's excluded them, whilst at the same time in the majority affecting those in the global south, working class, black and brown people. Yeah.
Thank you. So if I pass the question over to Rakaya. So you won the Roundhouse Poetry Slam in 2018. Can we have a round of applause for that? Because that is very, very impressive. And you also did that with the final piece that you performed for us, Box. So I just wanted to ask you, what does it feel like when your name gets called out and you realise that you have won the Roundhouse Poetry Slam?
Ooh, yeah, it was amazing. It was a shock. It was really special for me because that building, I grew up in northwest London, which is actually really far from here. Even though it shares a coordinate. The Roundhouse, my mom used to work there. In my teens, I worked there. I would let people in with their tickets when they went to go and see all the big sort of music acts. So it was surreal for me to be on that stage in the first place. And then, to win, that was just amazing, wonderful for me.
And so I'm kind of going to open this up to whoever feels like answering. So what I'd want to ask is, what role do you guys feel that performing spoken word poetry has played in your life? And how do you feel your lives may be not the same if you didn't do it? Whoever feels up for that one. Here we go.
I think it's played a massive role. I first performed at an open mic night in London when I was 17. Before that, I wanted to be a football player. I was shit. So I stopped wanting to be a football player. And performing at open mic nights, going on to continue doing that, going on to study a master's in poetry has given me something to do in life which I love and which I believe I'm good at.
Oh, cool. Well done. Do you want to answer the question?
What was the question again? What has it given me?
Well, I guess, what role do you feel performing spoken word has played in your life, and how do you feel your life may have changed if you hadn't have gotten into it?
I think it's sort of helped me to sort of explore another side to myself, because I'm a very quiet person. People who know me through my family think I actually don't speak at all. So when I won the competition, for example, because I was performing before that, but the aunties don't hear about just random performance, but they hear about the competition and they're like, "Oh my gosh, you do poetry, you can speak, you can," So it's allowed me to sort of explore a more creative performance side of myself, which I suppose I was exploring anyway, but poetry is just a great medium for conversation, exploring ideas. So yeah, I love it.
And pass that question over to Laura.
I think for me it was really nice to be able to perform in my accent, because I've done a lot of theatre stuff in the past and there aren't characters with this voice, and I can't hide it. I always sound like a character from Hull. So it was really liberating to be able to write for my own voice and sort of use it and exaggerate it. That was something that I think that was really cool. But I do think I wouldn't have gotten spoken word if I hadn't been in London. I think it's not the spoken word scene in London is incomparable to what's happening in, I don't want to speak for everywhere outside London, but in a lot of places I've lived up north, it's just not a thing. It's not poetry isn't a working class activity. And so, yeah, I feel lucky that I moved to a city where it's such a, it's just really accessible in London, and you don't feel silly doing it. Although I did feel silly when I went back home and told people I'd started doing poetry, because it's not a thing anyone I've grown up with does. So, yeah.
Great. So my final question before I open it up to the floor to a couple of questions in the audience is, so all three of you guys have done very well in your career so far. You're now featuring at nights. Very well done. So my question is to what advice would you give to anyone that's starting out, maybe that have only done it a couple of times, or maybe have written a lot and haven't performed yet? What advice would you give them in terms of advancing their career in spoken word?
I think, as has just been mentioned, it is quite accessible in London, particularly. Go to nights, read at libraries if not able to purchase books willy-nilly. And then I think that advice that I would give to myself, that I would give to people interested in poetry, and that I would give to audiences who are interested in poetry, is to value pain and suffering less than we currently do.
I would agree, like, just consume everything, like, watch other performers, read, like, everything, read poetry, read prose, read the papers. But also, like, work out what your unique take on it is. There's no point in saying something that's already being said by other people. Like, you have a unique perspective on certain subjects, so find those subjects that you care about and find what you have to say about it and say it in your voice. So, like, be inspired by other artists, but don't ever try and imitate them, because they're already doing their thing. So, like, work out what it is that you offer and then offer it. Yeah.
And then finally over to Rebecca.
Yeah, I would say you'll have a lot of friends who will tell you that everything you write is amazing. But you should find that friend, not who just wants to, like, be mean for no reason, but someone whose work you respect. Maybe they're a poet as well, or a good writer, and ask them for critiques of your work and how you can make, like, each poem better, because editing is, like, such a good skill to practice.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is a really good point. I think it's something that often we on the scene, everyone's very supportive of one another, and in a way that's what makes the scene so great. But yeah, that is maybe the downside of it. So yeah, I think they're really good points. Okay, so can we open it up to the ground, to the crowd? Does anyone have any questions? The guy in the purple tie has a question. So just say the question again. That question was, how do you pick the set list for your first kind of features? How do you choose which poems you perform? Do you do that based on the night, or do you do it prior to the evening?
I have, like, a few go-to poems that I just always do. But then I do also sort of choose on the night, depending on, like, the crowd and what's been said already. Sometimes if poems can, like, speak to what's already been said, so it's like joining in the conversation, then I like to do that.
Yeah, kind of. So because mine are all so long, I can only ever do, like, two. But it's kind of a similar thing. You sort of try to read if you're ever the very first performer, like the first open mic or anything like that at night, it's really nerve-wracking, I find, because you've not had any chance to sort of read the room a little bit. So you kind of read the room slightly and have, like, your options ready. But also, I think just check in with yourself. Like, it depends what kind of mood you're in. If you've got a more playful piece and you're feeling like that's what you want to perform, or, like, I've got a couple of pieces which, you know, I wrote when I wasn't in the best place, and I'm not always prepared to, like, I probably wouldn't do that if I was featuring at a night I'd never been to before, for example. So, like, just, yeah, like, check in with yourself and work out what you're going to enjoy performing the most. Because if you're enjoying yourself, then people are going to go along with it.
I think that's one of the most important things for me, enjoying yourself. Similarly, I have go-to poems, but I don't think I would necessarily enjoy it if at every night I was reading the same poems. And so then, again, read the room. If I look in the room and it looks like there are Nigerians in the room, I'm going to read specific poems because I know that there are references that they would get, and I appreciate that getting of it. Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to have one more question. I'm sorry, because we're really conscious of time here. So is there another question in the audience for one of the features? Cool. Danny?
How do you think because poetry at the moment is quite a condensed scene, how do you think we open up?
Sorry, so just say that question again. So that was, how do we open up the scene to involve more people in it?
I think one of the main and obvious tools that would maybe come to our minds is the internet and the power that the internet has. And I know that in the past I may have been snobbish about certain poems that I've seen on the internet, or many people close to me or friends with me have been snobbish about that. And I think that I no longer feel comfortable with criticizing things which make poetry more accessible, which is what I think we should all be trying to do.
So for me, it's quite a biased answer because this is what I do for a living, but I think it's about making sure there are creative opportunities for people who wouldn't traditionally have access to the arts. And I think for spoken word, for me in particular, it's trying to get to women's organisations because they do tend to be quite boy-heavy spoken word events. And it's about in creative workshops, what you're trying to do is go to a group and create a really relaxed and open way for them to just start creating stuff and sharing it, almost by accident. And as soon as you can do that in a room with, like you were saying, like earlier on when we were talking about Pit Stanger Poets, as soon as you can do that in a room with 10 people, you've got stuff and you've had that feedback and you've had that trusted feedback, which is the key thing about what you were saying, where it's like you can develop from that feedback. But yeah, for me, it's about like outreach, essentially. It's about making sure there are workshop opportunities for people who wouldn't necessarily consider themselves poets, because there are always going to be people who are like, well, yeah, it's not really for me.
Yeah. Following on from those answers, I think opening up to different communities in a way that you're catering for their needs and their what they're used to. So, little plug, I'm hosting 2 open mic nights. One is called Cave Open Mic, which is, they're both in Northwest London. Yes. Oh, North Wheezy. Okay. So Cave Open Mic is open to everyone, but it's a very sort of living room space. It's like shoes off. We sit on the carpet. There's cushions. It's also like an alcohol-free zone, kid-friendly. So it's really welcoming in, like a sort of family vibe. And then at the Hearth, which is a women's centre, we're starting with an International Women's Day Eve party / open mic night. So that's going to be on the 7th of March. That's going to be our first event together. But that is only women. So it's literally for anyone who wants to share and things that they might want to share in a safe space with other women.
Great, well that sounds like a lovely event. So we're going to wrap up, guys, because I'm conscious of time here. So I just want to say a massive thank you to our 3 features this evening. They've done a tremendous job. Thank you very much. Also, thank you to Ella and Ifti for hosting this evening. We will see you all guys at the next Off the Chest. Thank you guys for coming. Cheers.
There we have it. That was Word Spoken Live. Thank you very much for tuning in.